our sponsors. Alan? Of course we're going to thank Alan. Okay, so first we're going to thank our sponsors. I'd like to give a special thank you to Paul and Foreman. Their sponsors to commemorate the yahrzeit of Annie's father, Dov Ben Shol, Zichrono Livrocha, Neshama Shem Aliyah. Thank you to Arthur and Molly Kaplan. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of Molly's father, Velvel Ben Shalom, Neshama Shem Aliyah. Louis and Rita Klein is to commemorate the yahrzeit of Louis' father, Shraga Ben Eliezer, Neshama Shem Aliyah. We've got to thank Alan Zuck for not just putting so much time and effort and energy, but it's with commitment and love. You should see him here in the room beforehand, working on every single detail. It's quite amazing. It's a privilege for us here in the shul. It's not an easy task. He sometimes, using Alan's word, sometimes you're the puppy, but sometimes you're the fire hydrant. But the fact is, Alan puts in time and energy, and day in, day out. It's a tremendous commitment, and we must all have a tremendous amount of akar satov. So thank you, Alan. So this class has been in the making for about 42 years. 42 years. That doesn't sound like a long time for some of you, right? For me, it's a long time. And it really all started, preparing for this event started, I think it was 1975. And we were in Israel for the summer. And we went to visit my aunt, Aliza, my father's sister, Aliza's workplace. It happened to be the Knesset. She was the secretary of the Speaker of the House. I still remember the honor I had as a child, where she took me into the Speaker. He was a fellow by the name of Yeshayahu, Speaker of the House. And Yeshayahu says to me, as a 5-year-old, Hashem shel Yeshayahu, I think it was his last name, Hashem shelcha Yirmiyahu, v'anachnu tzrichim liot chaverim. We need to be friends. It was very uplifting for a child. It was a great honor indeed. We're walking out of the Knesset, and I am 4 or 5 years old, and there was a cute little puppy. There was a dog, and I loved dogs at the time. And I start playing with it, and the next thing I know is I do believe, scratched by the dog. And I walked away holding my hand, and I was crying. Now I know that that's true for 2 reasons. I remember it, and number 2, someone decided to take a picture of me at that moment. Now this is in the days when you actually have to make a decision to take a picture. Right? It's not like today. And I have the picture, and from that moment we started having this relationship with dogs that's been filled with tension, but at the same time interest. However, the preparing and what led to this class are 2 other incidents that occurred. So you got number 1. Number 2 was a visit to Baltimore a year and a half ago, where I was by my sister, and my sister Dvora has 2 wonderful children, Uziel and Adina Bracha, but I was introduced to the next member of the family, and her name is Lacey. And I walk into my sister's house, and Lacey is looking at me. Lacey is a Maltese. Ooh, Maltese. Lacey is a rescue dog. And there was this odd feeling I had. And here I am, and this creature is looking at me, and I look at the creature. I avoid eye contact, because I was told that it's a good idea with Lacey to avoid eye contact. And that was stage number 2 of me processing this idea of pet ownership, dog ownership, from a Jewish perspective. However, what really clinched it, and what really inspired me to address the issue was a talk I heard. This was a lecture online. I was not sitting and listening to it, but someone else was. And this authority, which I will avoid mentioning the name, this authority was asked, what is the Jewish perspective of pet ownership? Can a Jew own a dog? And an answer was given, and I was agitated by the answer. I was agitated by the simplicity of the answer. The answer given was that since a rabbi said that every single time you touch a dog, you have to wash your hands, and due to the fact that it is difficult to always do so, it's recommended to avoid owning a dog. That was the answer that was given. And I was very agitated by the answer. Very, very agitated. For two reasons. Number one, it's not true. Could be Kabbalistically, if you touch a dog, you should wash your hands. But that's not my field. And the real reason why this answer was so unsatisfying was because you're dealing with such a complex issue. And to give such a simple answer, not recognizing the significance of such a statement, drove me to the decision that I have to one day talk about a puppy. Why Chanukah? I'll tell you afterwards why specifically Chanukah. Perhaps if you read out, you look around in the world out there, it's very common to get a puppy for the other holiday that appears during the season. So therefore, perhaps a puppy for Chanukah makes sense. But there's more to it as well. So now we are ready to address the issue itself. How do we view pet ownership? And I do apologize to cat lovers. I apologize I apologize. And Ketzel as Neshama should have an aliyah. That's Josh's Ketzel left this world on the day after Yom Kippur, if I'm not mistaken. And we are told that, and this is true, that Chazal tell us that when a soul departs the day after Yom Kippur, it's a sign of righteousness because all their sins were taken care of on Yom Kippur. So I am not in any way, chas v'shalom, putting down the significance of Ketzel. At the same time, we're going to focus on dogs because that is how I have related to the animal kingdom from a very young age, as you know. So number one, let's start with a Talmudic source. The Talmud shares with us a story of a woman. This is a Talmud in Shabbos, Samach Gimel Amud Beis, where there's a woman that walks into a home and she is surprised in a very unpleasant way by a dog. And she's scared. And the owner walks over. And what do dog owners say when you are petrified from their German Shepherd? Right? Oh, don't worry, it doesn't do anything. It's a friendly dog. So, this obviously appears in the Talmud. And the owner says, oh, no, don't worry, do not be afraid, because I removed its teeth and its claws. Now, by the way, this supports my occurrence. I told you that I was scratched by the dog. And some of you wonder, wait a second, cats are the ones that scratch. But I have a Talmudic source for what occurred to me, that dogs can scratch. Okay, so this is what the Talmud tells us. Worry not. And the woman responded that you should know, I unfortunately, this is in the Talmud, had a miscarriage from the fact that I am petrified from your dog. This is what we are told. And therefore, halachically, we are told, Asur legadel kelev ra. There is a halachic prohibition of raising, of owning a kelev ra. However, now we're going to have to identify a kelev ra. And the halach itself tells us that in a situation that you live in an area that you need protection. In such a case, mutar. However, be sure that it is chained. Today they don't chain dogs anymore. Today there are good leashes. Be sure it is leashed. In a situation that you have to own a kelev ra for security. My sister and her husband Uri, they live in Baltimore, right? Baltimore, if you follow the news, is a city with a lot of violence, unfortunately. Recently, over the past few weeks, there have been a few carjackings that have occurred in the Jewish community. And so, unfortunately, my brother-in-law a few months ago was walking Lacey, the dog, and some individuals came from a specific part of the community there and wanted his wallet and his cell phone. My mother was surprised that Lacey didn't do anything, right? The little Maltese. Why didn't Lacey protect Uri, she wondered, right? So, if you indeed need protection, we are given a green light to have a kelev ra. You obviously have the responsibility of being sure that it is chained. This is what we are told. Now, how do you define a kelev ra? So some authorities tell us that if a dog bites, it's a kelev ra. There are others who say that even if it barks and scares people, it is considered a kelev ra, because as we were told in this story in the Talmud, the bark could cause damage as well. This is what we are told. So this is an awareness we have to have. And once we are addressing a few halachic issues, I will briefly mention a few areas that if indeed you are an owner of a pet, you have to be aware of. Number one, which indicates the sensitivity we are supposed to have, because a person is not supposed to eat before he feeds his animal. This is what halacha tells you. I don't know if it applies to the goldfish, right? And if you remember the story in the Torah of Rivka providing the water for Eliezer and only afterwards to the camel, so perhaps drinking is different. But obviously there is an indication here that the halachic system recognizes this idea that the animal is hungry. But that's number one. Let's go through a few more. You are allowed to feed an animal non-kosher food. Right? Even it's a very frum. Our animals, our peppers here have kippas. If you look on the table, they are very frum puppies. However, the puppy itself is allowed to eat non-kosher food. However, if there are foods that you are not allowed to derive benefit from, for example, a mixture of milk and meat, they are prohibited. Milk and meat, a mixture of milk and meat, there's a prohibition not just to eat, but even to derive benefit from it. You cannot go ahead and use it as a shampoo. If it's a mixture of milk and meat, then it's edible. So too, you are not allowed to give it to your dog. And there was an interesting story that occurred about 15 years ago, that there was a kosher agency in the United States that decided to give an hashgacha on dog food. Now, the dog food was not kosher. However, they did their research, they visited the facility, and they determined that the food itself did not have a mixture of milk and meat, so they put their hashgacha on it. Another kosher agency called them and informed them that there's a problem with their policy, because there are people in the United States, it appears, that are poor and, believe it or not, eat dog food. And if you're going to go ahead and have your hashgacha on it, the next thing you know, people will be eating it. Okay, this is what we're talking. I was a bit nervous when I put a title for this class, and I know of Alan's creativity, right? I was a little bit nervous due to the fact that that concept exists. However, this is what we are told. So that's rule number two. Now, number three, and again, we want to talk a little bit of halacha here before we get into the thought of what else or what significance this whole picture has. Pesach is complex with pets. You have to be aware of the fact that although your pet does not have to eat kosher food, it cannot eat chametz on Pesach. Kitnios it could, unless it's a machmir dog, but kitnios is fine. Another, you never know. The most complex of all areas of halacha, the most complex and the most relevant one, is the prohibition of removing reproductive organs. Neutering and spaying dogs and cats, it's a problem. Now, I'm not telling you that it's impossible, but you have to ask that question. How can it be done when the Torah prohibits it? And by the way, according to most authorities, the Torah prohibits not just a Jew from doing it, but even having a non-Jew do it. According to some, it's one of the laws that a nochad has to follow. This was a very significant issue where there were oxen that were needed for plowing. This goes back centuries, and there were different ways of addressing this issue. But I do ask you, if you plan to purchase a puppy or a kitten, and at the end of this class, and you want to do it properly, at least address this issue And there are specifics and ways that it could be done, but have the awareness that you have to do it in a very special way. The last one of the halachic issues that I would like to address is the fact that we are always taught that pets are muktzah on Shabbos. Muktzah. And this is what the traditional authorities note. There is the authority of the Tosfot that tells us that indeed, if it is something you play with, it is not muktzah. Most halachic authorities seem not to follow it. However, you do take that opinion into consideration to avoid tsar ba'alei chaim. In other words, in a situation that an animal is in distress, you most probably could take into consideration the opinion that it is permissible to move the pet. These are some halachic issues that are mentioned, but first of all, I talked about the fact that I was agitated by the response. And the reason I was agitated by the response given, addressing such a significant and complex issue with a simple statement is because there are very significant and very important benefits to dog ownership. And in many situations, it is considered, I would use the word even a mitzvah, to own a pet. The benefits that exist, and this is something that you can speak to any therapist and any psychologist, that the dog or the cat has the power to boost a mood. A person is in a bad mood. When it comes to anxiety, when it comes to stress, when it comes to depression, these are benefits that should not be ignored. And therefore, there are situations where it would be recommended for a person to go ahead and get a pet. Just as it was necessary for those living out in fields and needed protection, that they would get dogs, and we're talking about German Shepherds, right? Big dogs. And we are told that it is permissible. Obviously, you will have the responsibility of being sure that it doesn't cause harm to others. But just as we find that it was something that was okayed and it was something that was approved by the rabbinic authorities, there is no doubt in my mind that it is something that is highly recommended when you have children that have such needs, or in some cases adults. And therefore, to go ahead and give a blank statement that it's something that's problematic, that statement itself is problematic. Because in many situations, it is indeed recommended. Okay? The Jewish approach, right? In most cases, when you mention to people dog ownership, especially the older generation, the more traditional people, Yiddish-speaking people, right? What would they say to such a statement? Obviously, their approach was a hund, oy, gebal, right? I could just imagine my late grandmother, who loved my sister very much. She would have a hard time walking into my sister's house this day and age, because she was an old-time European. So there is a challenge, and that is something we cannot deny, but there are indeed benefits that cannot and should not be ignored. However, at the same time, we live in a very interesting world. About a year ago, there was a family visiting a zoo somewhere, I don't know if it was Cincinnati, they were visiting a zoo, and a child made its way into an area designated for gorillas. A gorilla picks up a child and starts playing with the child and lifting it as you would lift the small stuffed animal that you have on your table. There was a serious concern for the welfare of the child, so the zoo officials make a decision that they're going to take down the chimpanzee. And as a result, at age 13 years and something months, Harambe returned its soul to wherever chimpanzee souls return. The media, and there are many in social media, were extremely upset. Right? To go ahead, in other words, the parents are not responsible in allowing their child to play and land up in an area designated for chimpanzees, and you have to kill a chimpanzee when there's just for the child. You know, when you see a bumper sticker, and I've seen it, my dog is better behaved than your children. I've seen that bumper sticker. I'm not saying it's not true, But at the same time, we live in a world where we do not have that ability to sense that, yes, perhaps there's a benefit, but it's not a human being, right? Have your priorities straight, right? Or another bumper sticker, why have children if you could have a dog? And these are statements that should be very agitating for us Jews, because what's fundamental as a Jew is to understand that there's value in the world, and there's value in existence, and there's value when human beings populate the world. There's a mitzvah, and this is the greatest mitzvah, it's called Yishuv HaOlam. We want the world to be settled. And we live in a time that when you see someone out there taking care of children, right, with all the difficulties that involves, you have to recognize that they're doing something incredible. They're fulfilling the mission of humanity, that we should exist, that we should be around in 100 years from now. Right? The great challenge in Western civilization, that we're not producing enough children. Right? Why? Because you can have a pet. The pet does not answer back. Right? The dog is not going to argue. The dog is not going to have an opinion. When we go ahead and elevate animals and make them into humans, that is when we have a problem. We had an occurrence in Memphis that my daughter Devora was knocking on someone's door, and a big dog, I think it was a German Shepherd, again, I'm very tough on the German Shepherds, as you can tell, knocks her down. So I sent an email to the dog owner, and the response was, whatever his name was, is a member of our family. I'm very sorry to your daughter, but the fact is that this dog, whatever his name is a member of the family, and do not expect us to do anything about it. I have charot, I have regret, did not go beyond that. A few months later, there was an older person in the community that knocked on their door and got knocked down by this dog, the same chayet, and needed to go for months of physical therapy and broken bones. And then I wrote again an email back to this individual. He wrote back an email criticizing me for whatever he can. But the attitude that people have and not recognizing that there's a value system, yes, it does have a purpose at times, not minimizing that. But the Meshuggah world we live in, where there's no understanding that you have to value what a human being is. And that is an area that needs some guidance. You know that there was a photographer who went to some jungles, I think in Indonesia, to take pictures of specific types of monkeys, the Naruto monkeys. He placed his camera, and one of these monkeys walks over to these cameras, smiles, and pushes a button, and the monkey, most of this good news, took the first selfie. Okay? Now, the photographer is all excited, he posts it online, and then some other organization decided to use that photograph. The photographer is upset, he sues them. The other organization claims that you, the photographer, have no copyright over the picture. The copyright belongs to the monkey. And these individuals that went to court in San Francisco and all places, San Francisco, and PETA supported the individual claiming that the copyright belongs to the monkey. You realize where society is going with this, right? That a court has to, can you imagine if it would come to me, that someone claiming a monkey has a copyright, but in San Francisco, the courts had to sit, and you can sit online now, and watch the discussion and the deliberation, because indeed, monkeys are perhaps not so far, because after all, they're 99%, we share 99% of the DNA with chimpanzees. Right? This is where the world is going, and this is what's very dangerous, an area that we have to be mindful of. However, I remember mentioning here that halachically speaking, on Yom Tov, it's permissible to shecht. Something that's very foreign to us today. Perhaps some of the people who have memories from European communities would recall that on a Yom Tov, you eat chicken, and the chicken is going to be fresh chicken that was shechted that day. That was the norm. George, remember that at all? No, not. But George did take chickens with him at time. George once went on a school trip, and he took 2 chickens with him because the shechet was in another town, right? He killed one of them, And I won't tell Pita, right, that one of them died in your backpack or something. Yeah, that's what happened. So, we are told that on Yom Tov you could check. Now, one of those days where it is permissible to go ahead and prepare food that is ochel nefesh, one of those days is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Tov, right? We sit here in shul. At the same time, we are obligated to realize Vegilu Berada. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to have a festive meal. Nevertheless, although food preparation is permissible on Rosh Hashanah, as it would be permissible on any other Yom Tov, the the custom was not to shecht on Rosh Hashanah. That was a minhag, meaning on Pesach, on Sukkot, 100%, Rosh Hashanah not. Commentators explain that this is a day of judgment, and therefore on this day, shekulanu mevakshim rachamim. It is a day that we are all asking for mercy from the Creator. It is not appropriate on this day to go ahead and be unmerciful. This is what we are told. Now, this is not to tell us that you should avoid meat, but the idea of sensitivity. There is a Jewish sensitivity that we should have towards animals. It is called Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, right? We should be sensitive. Yes, we recognize the fact that if we are using it for our own benefit, it is permissible, and we are not violating Tsar Ba'alei Chaim. But on Rosh Hashanah, we want to convey that message. There's a magnificent story that the Talmud shares with us. The Talmud addresses the life of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the actor of the Mishnah, really the foundation of oral tradition. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the Talmud tells us, went through a period in his life when he had Yisurim. He was going through a pain, he had some kind of ailments, and these were spiritual people that were interested and perhaps had a way of identifying the reason that brought about their suffering. So the Talmud wonders, what was it? What was it that Rebbe did wrong? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the righteous leader, what is it that he did wrong that brought upon him suffering? So we are told that there was a story that he was walking, and a young calf was on its way to be slaughtered. And the young calf makes its way to Rebbe and rubs itself on Rebbe and cries, indicating that the calf somehow recognized that it's going to be slaughtered. And Rebbe turns to the calf and says, Zil, meaning go. Lekach notzarta. That is the reason, or that is your purpose. That is why you were created. I think it's a very normal statement. However, there was a voice in heaven that said, oh, you Rebbe, since you do not have mercy, you deserve to be punished. This is what we are told. Now, when a story is presented in the Talmud, it is for us to learn a message. And the message here is that as Jews, we should be sensitive to animals. There is a concept of Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, a very significant one. And like everything in Judaism, you got to keep things balanced. You know, when Spain was considering outlawing shechita. You know what happens in Spain? I lived in Mexico for some time, right? My brother was born in Mexico. So, you know what's done at a bullfight, right? Can you imagine that that's a society that is telling us to go ahead and prohibit shechita due to the fact that it's lacking sensitivity? When in Germany, one of the first halachic issues that were dealt with in the early 1930s with the Nazis was the fact that they were obligating the Jewish community to stun the animals before shechita because they claimed that the shechita of the Jews is cruel. Right? This is what's happening in Germany. Right? This is the world that exists, and the concept has its roots. But like everything in Judaism, you go ahead and you go overboard. You destroy concept. You destroy the message. Now, the connection to Chanukah. Right? Let's connect this to Chanukah. You know that when we are celebrating next week, we are celebrating events that occurred during the Second Temple period. But we know very well that if this holiday remained even after the destruction, it has significance for today as well. And when we read about the prophecies of Zechariah had visions in the beginning of the Second Temple period. And the way it works with prophets and their visions is that they do not see things in a chronological order, but rather they see things at times that are placed together because their themes are similar. So Zechariah Navi is talking and inspiring the people of Israel that you should know there will be a greater return from Babylonia because many Jews did not return in the beginning of that period. Now, so when he talks about a vision of an Israel that's growing, he has a vision not just of the Israel that expanded or the Jerusalem that expanded during the Second Temple period, but his vision had as well that which is occurring today. How do I know that? So Zechariah tells us that a day will come where Prazot Teshev Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim itself is going to be considered an open city, not a walled city. Now, Yerushalayim has always been, throughout the Second Temple period, was a walled city. Jerusalem was a walled city until 1865. And then something occurred. You have Moses Montefiore, you have the new neighborhoods, and over the past 150 years we have an expanding city that no one is going to call Jerusalem, no one is going to call Yerushalayim a walled city, right? It's a wide city, right? You're familiar with West Jerusalem, the official capital of the state of Israel as of today, right? As if we didn't know, good class. So when Zechariah has a vision of an optimistic future, and he has a vision of a menorah that's a symbol of the times of the Second Temple period, this is a vision of the future as well. It's a vision of a messianic era as well. And with that, let me share with you a fascinating statement made by Rav Kook. Rav Kook notes, every single day in our Shemona Esrei, we have a Yehi Ratzon, where we turn to God at the end. And we ask him that the day should come, that we return to Yerushalayim, Shibaneh Bet HaMikdash B'mera B'yameinu. It is fundamental as a Jew to believe that things are not complete until we have that temple. And when we pray for that temple, if you tune into the tefillot that we have for Musaf, they do refer to korbanot, which are sacrifices of animals. But then we add the words ve'arva Hashem, and it will be desirable to God. The mincha, you know what a mincha is? The meal offering of Yehuda Yerushalayim. The meal offering of God should be, the meal offering of Yehuda and Yerushalayim should be desirable to God, like Hashanim Kadmoniyat, like the good old days. Now, why is it that we specifically turn to God and ask Him that the meal offerings of the people of Israel should be desirable to God Almighty? Says Rav Kook that in the Messianic era, what we pray for is indeed a Bet HaMikdash that will function as we address it and as we are familiar with from our tradition. But there will be a time where there's going to be knowledge, a Shefa Hadat he calls it, an expansion of knowledge that will reach not just people, but even Ba'alei Chaim, even animals. And as a result of the knowledge that animals are going to have, they're going to be elevated. And as a result of that, we will no longer be able to bring them as offerings, but rather the offerings in the Bet HaMikdash are going to have to be of mincha, me'at someach, from food that is grown, not from an animal that we kill. This is what he notes. And when I see the madness that occurs in the world out there, at the same time, I could be agitated, but at the same time you recognize that these are like what we could call lights from the future. That there's something that is occurring, right? There is something that is occurring, that there's a different relationship we have with animals. There's no question about that. And although ownership of dogs goes back many, many years, it's interesting that when the Ramah in the 16th century talks about this halachic question of yes or not owning a dog, he tells us that you should know, if you have a question, see what people do. And people owned dogs in Poland. This is what he tells us. This was the norm. So therefore, there is no question that ownership existed. But the relationship, I don't think that in Poland they had baby carriages for dogs. I don't think that people had matching outfits for their dogs. I don't think so, right? The way you find today people talking about their dogs, that it is just like another child. When you have authors, that they want to place their picture at the end of their book, and they have their picture of themselves holding holding whatever dog they did, their Pomeranian or their Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, whatever animal they do own. It is a new era and a new type of relationship. It is a dangerous one when the significance of a human being is minimized, but at the same time we can see it as perhaps an elevation, but as the significance of the dog grows, we hope that the significance of the human grows, and we value ourselves, we value our actions, and as we celebrate a holiday of light, may the light of Judaism and its messages be the ones that inspire us. We won't take any questions. What time do you have exactly? Let's go yes, so we will start. We'll take a few questions. Start with Gershon. Go ahead.
Does the prohibition of spaying animals come under?
Okay. So what Gershon is asking is, wait a second, I mentioned that removing a reproductive organ is considered one of the prohibitions for Noachites, but we are always told that there are 7, correct? That there are 7. So the truth is that although the number 7 is always given, the Talmud shares with us that there is an opinion that actually there are 30. And most of them are viewed as subcategories of the 7. However, the removal of reproductive organs is indeed one of them that doesn't fit into the 7. So this is it's a very odd situation that the number 7 remains, but nevertheless the removal of reproductive organs, and it relates to the idea that God doesn't want a species to vanish, right? We believe as Jews that even those unique birds in the Amazons, that when you do see them, when you could watch something on the National Geographic or BBC Earth, you are inspired by these creatures. We do not understand why, but there's some kind of purpose in creation they have. Dogs and cats are needed. The Almighty wants them in the world. Removing their ability to reproduce, right, conceptually is problematic. Obviously, perhaps necessary in some cases, but at least that's why it's an issue that has to be addressed halachically. But the question's a good one. Yes, David?
Did you say it was at the Araisa not to remove?
We're dealing with the Torah prohibition, the Gemara tells us.
So, from where? What's the source?
Okay, so when you talk about a Deraisa, it's not always a verse. It could be in Halacha leMoshe Messinai, that it is something that you don't do. It's an opinion of Rabbi Milevsky that's mentioned in the Talmud, and it's mentioned among Halach authorities. It was a significant issue for farmers when they had to deal with their cattle. But there were options that were given. Among them was that you are not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do it, but you get a non-Jew to get another non-Jew to do it. Well, there's a problem, and let's address it. Yonatan.
You talk about Sa'ar on Shabbos as possible, a possible basis for helping the animal because of Sa'ar B'Chaim. Is there a way to describe more specifically what would constitute Sa'ar? Because our sister might be more sensitive to the animal's needs than the objective observer.
Again, it is a question. It's going to be a gray area. I don't think getting Lacey up the stairs to the second floor, that Lacey could sleep in the bed, would be considered Tzar Ba'alei Chaim. If there would be great discomfort, right, if Lacey would fall into a bucket of tar, and there are feathers next to it, then you want to prevent it from going to the feathers, then perhaps yes. So obviously you would have to assess the situation, what exactly fits into the category of Tzar. Yes, doctor?
There is a concept of Gilgul HaNefashot. Now, do some Nefashot come down as animals?
Okay.
And if so, maybe that's one of the reasons that you have to be kind to animals, you never know. And what?
You don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know. Okay. As you are very well aware, we Jews are very diverse. There are those that are mystical, and they talk about Gilgulim, and they like talking about the soul of so-and-so, so-and-so is a reincarnation of a soul of so-and-so. There are prayers we have during the high holiday season where we ask for forgiveness, not just for what we did in our lifetime, but even for things that were done that perhaps my soul did in an earlier round. There are such prayers. Now, I skip those prayers, and I'll tell you why. Because I did enough wrong things in my life that I don't have to add the mistakes that were done by my neshama in the last Gilgul. So I skip them in general. And at the same time, it is good to be sensitive. For those who are more mystical, there are always stories they would tell us as kids, those that have a deep impact on our soul. That of the cat that would hang out next to the caver of the big tzaddik, and someone said to the cat, "We're meichel you," and the cat went away. You've heard those stories, I'm sure. So if you're comfortable with those stories, perhaps it gives some clarity. I'm just comfortable with the idea that they live, and just as in the story of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, an animal that cries, like when you hear a puppy crying, it's a cry, there's pain there. So that's enough of a reason for me to be sensitive to it. But that's a good thing to throw into the mix here. Okay, yes?
My maternal grandparents, had a farm, we had 2 guard dogs. We had some dog houses, because if somebody passed by and somebody could hear, they barked, so we knew, they were guarding. And we would tell as kids, we cannot say a bracha with a dog in the room.
You wouldn't even say a bracha. Interesting. What's interesting there is, number one, what you describe is precisely what the authorities talk about, that people own dogs for safety, for security. And at the same time, you're touching upon the general attitude, the negative attitude that existed in the whole country towards dogs, that it was used as unclean, and even a bracha would not be said in front of it. That's that's quite incredible. We have a sensitivity of not bringing them into a shul, right? At the same time, when a person needs an eye dog, in other words, a person who's lost the sight, that obviously Moshe Feinstein gives a green light, but it's very interesting that you see here the history and the attitude of the past. Devora, what do you want to say?
But aren't dogs compared to the lowest level of tumor or something? I heard that somewhere.
There are comparisons. There are comparisons that talk of them being impure. No question about that. But we have to, when it works, when you address something, it's like, I would compare it to medicine. You remember the story in Memphis? There was the story in Memphis where the Bravermans, and they had a little cute kid, Akiva, if you remember. And Akiva got a cat. Akiva was 2, and Akiva loved the cat. And a few days later, Akiva got a little tummy ache, and his mama said to him, you know what makes you feel good? Some Tylenol or Motrin. So the kid got a spoonful of Motrin, and he took it, and he was all feeling better. So the 2-year-old thinks to himself, wait a second, I love my cat. Motrin makes you feel good. So if I put that together, I shall give Motrin to the cat. The cat will just feel tremendous. So he grabs the cat, right, and he pours down the Motrin. And that was the end of their cat. So the idea is that there are things that are like medicine. And perhaps in a household, when you have someone that can do so much good with their time, of chesed and tzedakah and limud Torah, for them to go ahead and entertain themselves with a dog is something that's problematic. Like Rabbi Yaakov Emden used to say, that those who entertain themselves with dog, it's a moshe leitzim. But like medicine, for some people it's the greatest blessing. It is such an important tool. And to go up and declare that it is tameh period, that itself could create a problem because there are many, many people that benefit from it. There was a TV series in Israel called Shissel. Remember? Shtisel. Okay, so it was a TV program. It was an excellent program describing the Hasidic world. You could see it on, the writers are just brilliant. So one of them, the patriarch, I think the Shulam, his name is? Shulam is smoking always. So one of them, his grandchild walks in with a little dog. And you see the grandfather of Shulam, like, this is a tiny little, probably Maltese. And you see the grandfather stepping away and not being sure how to even look at it, right? That's the general attitude that exists. And it has roots. At the same time, and again, to emphasize the benefits that exist are ones that should not be ignored. And it's a medicine. So we have to balance things properly, not to go ahead and walk around with t-shirts, that dogs are people too. But at the same time, value the benefits that do exist by owning the canine. Thank you so much, and a good evening. A rough crowd. Okay, I think they're at a dessert time. Rabosai dessert.